Hello, everyone. I'm Randall Mendenhall alongside Brandon LaBelle on location at the Range Systems Studio. Our featured speaker today is Brandon LaBelle, International Government and Law Enforcement Sales Representative here at Range Systems. Brandon has a firearms instruction background and brings years of military law enforcement experience to the table. Brandon's topic today is about how to advance law enforcement training with tactical sidewalls. Brandon, thank you for joining today.
Thanks. Good to be here. Excited to get into the topic and the subject matter, and hopefully we can get some good questions later on.
All right, Brandon. So this is sometimes a problem for law enforcement management. And really the question is, or the situation is, my officers need real life movement. What can you tell us about that?
Well, oftentimes I get a lot of calls and emails here in the office from law enforcement and different departments all over the world, actually. And one of their largest problems, I'd say a majority of them have a problem with having the ability to train off the mark with their officers. Being able to go multi-fire, like live fire, multi-directional, and being able to engage their targets and prepare for real-world scenarios. Basically, the encounters that our law enforcement officers experience on a day-to-day basis don't happen, in a straight line at 15 yards and 20 yards down the range. Everything, for a majority of the time, it happens within a couple feet, which what we call in retention range.
All right, so Brandon, as you mentioned, traditionally it's fixed position training. What can you tell us about how that looks?
Well, most departments within the United States, anyway, their officers need to qualify once or twice a year. Of course, this is, it varies from department to department, state to state. But we find that most departments need to qualify once or twice a year, which would be a minimum requirement. Officers are expected to take it upon themselves to do more training and be as well trained as possible. But being minimum requirements, this could really mean that each individual officer may only be shooting 30 to 50 rounds per year, and we think that most officers would agree that's just not sufficient for actual scenario to be proficient at being able to employ those tactics in real world scenarios. As mentioned before, real life just doesn't happen in one direction.
That's a very good point. Okay, so with that, what can you tell us about the multi-directional live fire training?
Well, having the ability to move in multi directions allows the officers to train the way they actually engage suspects in real life scenarios. In the picture here, you can see that's me in our live fire tactical range. Is actually last week we had some veterans in that we were taking through some courses of fire and having a good time doing some training there. Being able to actually train in these types of scenarios, utilizing these movements, it encourages the proficiency of your officers, right? They get to actually train the way they actually move out there on the job. It can be, as Randall's there highlighting, applied in real life situations. And I think, it just makes no sense to train in a way that you don't actually perform. So what we're really emphasizing is being able to get off the mark, stop being stationary, and as mentioned before in one of the previous slides, most officers would agree that that is what needs to happen. You need to be able to move. It really doesn't make as much sense to just stand there and shoot at a target 20 yards away.
Well, if we asked many law enforcement agencies what they would like, ideally, many would say, hey, we'd love a full shoot house we'd love having that large facility with lots of rooms in it to, to do all the advanced stuff. And, what would some of the things that they'd be able to do if they had a shoot house? What would some of those be?
Oh, no doubt. If I'm getting the, whoever's in charge of the department range calling me up on the phone, if they were to show me their Amazon wish list, it would be right at the top would be a multi-level shoot house for their department to be able to get in there and train their officers. And what the shoot houses offer, wide range of training applications. So you've got the room clearing, you got breaching potentials, and you get into the breaching and things like that. So that's more of a SWAT type application. But the rooms and multi-levels, that's what officers encounter every day. Being able to have that live fire training ability is just incredibly valuable. However, the shoot houses are significantly more expensive than some tactical sidewalls. A lot of times these departments calling me up, they already have an existing range. So when you hear the price tag attached to a shoot house, most departments don't have that in their budget to cover. So what may be a less expensive option is to go with tactical sidewalls in the existing range they already have, or a range that they're planning to build.
Excellent. Yeah, a full shoot house really is a marvelous facility. However, again, as you emphasize there, it's very budget driven and a significant investment. So the low-cost alternative would be some tactical sidewalls. What exactly are tactical sidewalls?
So basically, the application of a tactical sidewall system within a shooting range is being able to ballistically protect the sidewalls and having the shootability of 270 degrees within that facility. And that's the point. That virtually eliminates any ricochet or backsplatter. So, up to, from point blank to as far back as you want to move. It really allows the officers to be able to train in that retention range we were talking about earlier, as, that area around them where they're actually dealing with people in potential suspects on a day-to-day basis.
And Brandon, why don't you just point out a couple of the components that we're looking at here in this picture for our audience?
So if you look in the picture there, you can see we've got a granular rubber trap there. So we've got 18 inches of depth minimum there of granular rubber. Behind that's going to be angled mild steel. The sidewall there to the right of the range. Now that sidewall goes all the way back to the shooters. That may not necessarily be all ballistic. It really doesn't make sense to do 50 yards cost-wise, 50 yards on each side of steel, ballistic steel and our ballistic rubber. Most departments and military that we talk to they go forward with building some tactical sidewalls. They'll go about 20 feet out from the trap. Saves on cost and gives them that 270 degrees of multi-directional live fire ability.
Well, we've defined what tactical sidewalls are. Now let's continue going into the topic with how they can be applied. What can you tell the audience about that?
Well, they're commonly installed in new ranges. So, when you have the build plans, we would work with your existing architect or engineer, or city planners, whoever's doing the development of the construction of the range, and make sure we get those in there into the process. However, that doesn't exclude existing ranges. Basically, the components we need is a sidewall that you can attach the ballistic steel to, and the ability to put our ballistic rubber right on top of that steel. All
right, next, I'd like to just cover our key takeaways. To summarize today's webinar, Brandon, what would you say the key takeaways are?
Well, I mean, if you have the idea that, which I think we covered, most officers already have that need, that requirement to be able to get off the mark and have multi-directional live fire training ability. So first thing you want to do is get a hold of a shooting range provider, and get in touch with their range designer as soon as possible. A lot of times these projects take, they take 12 to 18 months, depending on budgetary restrictions, and any number of elements that can come into play and kind of, throw a wrench into things. But the sooner you can get in touch with the range provider and start that conversation, then you can start talking about numbers. And like I said, you're only limited by your imagination on how you can design your range to be better effective, utilizing the tactical sidewalls. Being able to have that realistic training, I think everybody can agree, the better trained your officers are, the safer they're going to be, the more confident they're going to be in their ability to perform their job on a day-to-day basis. The importance of that is just being able to engage the tactical sidewalls from point blank to as far back as you need to. It's just there's just so many different uses for it. So, I think we've covered that pretty thoroughly through the webinar here. The next thing down on the line here is the commonly applied in shooting ranges. So, again, going back to one of our very first slides is, with the shoot houses. So if you already have a current range, you're not restricted by any means, right? You have the ability to get in there, put some tactical sidewalls up, and train nearly the same way you could with a shoot house on a much smaller budget, all right? So if you have multiple bays, some of these existing ranges, you may have a bay for long guns, a bay for handguns. Well, you can make just one of those bays. You can make all of those bays. You're only limited on what your budget is going to be able to do for you. A lot of times, a department will take one bay and just make that their tactical bay, and that makes a lot of sense depending on the size of it. So, like I said, you're only really restricted on your imagination how to apply this tactical sidewall system.
Well, this concludes the content portion of our webinar. Thanks again to everyone who joined, and have a great day. We'll see you on the range.
Thanks, guys.